to see everybody. You are now stuck in the Phil and Blake show. So hang on tight for the next 45 to 50 minutes or so. Before we get started, I want three people. Just what are you most interested in? What brought you here, as opposed to all the other great content that's going on? Need three brave souls, or I'll start calling on people. This talk, yeah. So is there a question that you came in with? Is there something you're looking forward to? Yes, Stephanie.
So we just launched a new strategic plan with CX as a large pillar of it. So
yeah.
I just hear what you have to say about that, and awesome. We can learn anything to add.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I might have to have you get up here and give some examples of how that process went. Thanks, Stephanie. Who else? Yes, sir.
I'm a recent addition to our project management team, so I'm here to understand all the things that I can do to make the experience better for my clients.
Fantastic. Good motivation. Awesome. And then I saw one more hand up here.
Yeah, my CEO wants to open a new office in a different state, and my direct manager is freaking out because a recession's coming. So
yeah, so how's that going to work, right? Are we going to acquire? Is it going to be organic? Is it going to be a team move? Are we going to hire somebody? There's all kinds of different ways to go about that. Well, perfect. Well, we're going to try to give you some time at the end to ask questions. And I'd like this to be more interactive than less interactive. It's just a lot more fun than just listening to me drone on and on and on, because I'm not the most charismatic speaker in the world. I'm an engineer. I'm a physicist by background. And then I went and got a business degree and started a few firms. So, I like to get into the numbers sometimes, but we're going to try to steer clear of that. We're going to talk about the power of this. We're going to use some of the statistics to highlight that. But we're really going to talk a lot about the power of strategic planning, and particularly a client centricity strategy, which is putting client experience first as the primary driver for your whole strategic plan. And so we're gonna dive through that a little bit. Got colleague Blake up here. So let's just get into the introductions here. So the 30-second idea behind Y Group, and who's Y Group is. Many of you may be familiar with us. We are trying to elevate the industry through being the leaders of driving purpose and performance for the AEC universe. So we focus on architects, engineers, contractors. What I do a little bit bleeds the lines a little bit into manufacturing and other professional services as well. But we've got a lot of really great kind of subject matter experts in very specifically within that field. And so we do that through kind of three pillars. We've got advisory, we have training and events, and then we also have our research and publications. And it's kind of this virtuous cycle amongst all of them. We learn from each other and adapt, and each part of it makes every other part of it better. And you probably know Mr. Blake Godwin.
Yeah. So I'm Blake Godwin, president at Client Savvy. You may or may not know the background of us, but we've been known as the thought leaders in client experience management within professional services since 2004. We were originally designed for the architectural, engineering, and construction space to help firms realize what their sentiment and what their clients were feeling in a non-confrontational way, to which they could then take data, turn that into action, create better experiences, which then lead to better business outcomes. Fast forward a bunch of years later, we also consult on client experience management, and we partner with Zweig in a lot of different efforts, and some of the things that they do, like strategic planning and other areas of their business, we integrate CX into that to make that end product and that value proposition holistically better than it would be if it was done independently. So.
Thanks, Blake. Yeah, it was a big part of our research and development process for an input into the strategic plan design is client experience and understanding the insights from clients. And so Blake and his team have been a huge help in driving better insights and more insights from more clients using the client feedback tool and their team's expertise. So it's been really great. Let's see where we're headed. Very simply, we're going to talk about the problem, recession. Depression is the new, there's a lot of people talking about depression now, right? It may be even worse than just a recession. We're going to talk about a framework that we follow regarding strategic planning, and then we're going to get into the solution, and that's where Blake's going to take over and talk us through the solution of how client experience in strategic planning can really lead your firm to better business outcomes. And then we're going to talk about the case studies. So what are some real-world examples of firms that we've worked with that have done this in hard times, done it in good times, and have seen really great results as an outcome of following this strategy. All right. So recession, it's coming, and I'm going to try to prove that to you. I got a lot of slides that are coming up. with economic data, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. It's boring stuff, it's graphs, it's numbers, and there's a lot here, and if you're interested, if you geek out on it like I do, then I'll send you the slides, and you can dig through as much of it as you want, and we can go to the Fred website, and we can start looking at all the different numbers that they publish. But we're gonna jump through that. The idea here, the general theme of this section, is really about looking at what the pressures are on each one of your businesses. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we get into the framework section of this presentation. But there are a couple of levers and a couple of things that you simultaneously have to manage, two of those being employee experience, or the employees within your business, and what kind of leverage do they hold. It's been huge. The leverage that your employees have had over the last several years has been phenomenal. It's been by far the number one thing that most firms are worried about. They're worried about recruiting and retention. They're worried about how do they keep people, how do they find people, and we can't pay them enough to come on board. And so that has been really the drumbeat of a lot of the strategic plans, is this theory, which I think is solid, of we take care of our people take care of our clients. Unfortunately, what normally happens during a downturn is the client is, king or queen, the client is the ruler of the roost, comes back around during a downturn, because if you don't have clients, obviously you don't have a business, right? And so you need to really pay attention to those. It's also a lot harder to capture clients during a downturn than it is during good times, because they're less willing to spend their dollars trying new things out, trying people that they don't necessarily have a relationship with. And so what we're starting to notice as we make this shift, and as times keep tightening, we start seeing people really focus on client experience, really focus on their clients, get back to how do we serve our clients, what is client satisfaction, how do we measure that, how do we hold people accountable for it. That's been really, really the gist of the strategic plans that we've been designing lately, because it has to be, right? It absolutely has to be a focus, and we've all been so busy for so long, got record backlogs, right, in the industry, got a record amount of work, and so responsiveness and quality have slipped. And now it's like, well, we need to tighten this up before things get really, really bad. And we'll show you, some of that is starting to tighten, and you're starting to see some pullback on projects. So let's just look at a quick snapshot of the current marketplace, right? Taking it from top to bottom, inflation, 42-year high. Labor pool percentage, this is the labor participation rate. It's an all-time low, 46-year low. Construction, looking at the numbers there, 1.7 trillion in 2021, and it's down to 1.4. You're starting to see a contraction there. A&E is about 320 billion in 21. You're starting to see that as well kind of follow suit. So it's kind of works its way downhill from there. 30-year mortgages are 15-year high, and the federal funds rate, they've had the largest hike in the last 28 years, and that's been consistent over the last several hikes in terms of the quantity of that hike, but it's the highest rate that we've seen since 2007, which is right on, for those of you who remember, 2008, 2009, all the way till 10, depending on where you are and what business you're in, where it affected you. The stock market's definitely in a bear market. The Dow Jones, you could argue that it's kind of flipped. It's generally, defined as a 20-point drop, but S&P, all the other ones are still in the bear market. Consumer sentiment is just up, just a little bit from the all-time low in June of 2022. And then unemployment is at a 53-year low. So I'll talk about this with another slide, and how that affects your ability to recruit good people and what that does to it. So let's look at the total federal assets. So you can see market increase, right, in total federal assets in the QT program. That's an indicator that the government's trying to keep the economy on track, right? You look at your GDP, 2020 was kind of a weird year. Everybody knows that because of COVID, but it's coming back down, right? It's coming below baseline again. You look at layoffs, and where we're starting to see those first, where we normally see those first, is the tech industry. So you can take a look on this graph and this chart on the left. You take a look at, it starts at Q1 of 2020. I know it's small, so you probably can't read it. So it starts at Q1 of 2020 and goes through Q2 of 2023. You can see market increase. You can see on the right just a table of those companies that are doing those layoffs. 12,000 for Google, 11,000 for Meta, Amazon 10,000, Microsoft 10,000, so on and so forth. It's big numbers. You look at the consulting space, also big numbers. EY, PwC, you look at McKinsey, they're also making massive layoffs. This is becoming, this is rippling its way through the economy. There's a valuation reset. So if you look at the stock market, right, you look at the PE ratio, which is an indicator of impending recessions, right? This is way down, and we're just looking at this year to last year. If you looked at these numbers, if I would have added another year into this, it was much more significant last year. So when I presented a similar slide a year ago, these came down from about 50 to 18 for the Dow Jones Industrial Average. You can see most of them are still coming down from a year ago. They're still coming down, which is really bad news for us. You look at mortgage rates, anybody that's trying to buy a house like I am in this market, it's been kind of tough, right? You look at the yield curve inversion right here, another indicator of impending recessions. So that's coming down. And what I didn't mention here, just quick frame of reference here, any of these gray bars that you see in all of these graphs, these are recessions throughout the time period. So you can see the recession 2008 to 2009, 2020 recession, and then back around the dot-com bubble as well. Unemployment rate, huge spike in 2020 as expected. Everybody knows what happened there, but now we're all the way back down here, right, in terms of unemployment rate. And that is typically a good thing, but with the high inflation combined with all these other economic factors, that is not a good thing. That is, they're actually, the reason that the Fed keeps hiking rates is because they're trying to create more unemployment. They're trying to bring down the volume of money to bring down the inflation rate in the economy. And so it makes it really hard. It's another lever that we can't pull to get the economy back on track. And so it continues to kind of move into this negative territory that we really don't want to see. When you look at construction materials, this is a producer's price index. This has changed from a year ago. You can see going all the way back to 1950, pretty steady increase until you hit about 2020, and then holy cow, right? And I think everybody's dealt with this, particularly those in the design space, the building space. You've seen this, and it's starting to come down. It came down a little bit, right? But nowhere near what it has been historically. And so it's much more significant. You look at two of the things that we watch is the AIA Billings Index, and then the Dodge Momentum Index for construction. And so you look at the trends here. This goes back a year to March 2022. This is March 23 on the right side here. And what you're looking for is above 50, right? But you can just see the design contracts, the inquiries, everything is trending downward. Not very good. And the Dodge Momentum Index, that took a sharp downturn starting in March. So you can kind of see where that little blip is starting to turn the corner and come back. So hopefully I killed you with some data. This is my last data slide, right? I'm trying to. It's super exciting. We're going to start with expectations way down here. So this is taking a look at NCIS codes of professional services. So it's 54 is general classification, but 541 professional, scientific, and technical services. You can see the total number of entities that are classified in that way, right? And so we've got legal services up top, you've got accounting, and then on the bottom you've got your design professionals within architecture and engineering, survey, etc. And the reason I have this in here is because it remains relatively stable over time. There's a little bit up, a little bit down, but the number of entities and the people within the entities is almost always very much the same. And so what this tells us is we're competing, we're doing more work for more clients with the same amount of people typically. And you've only really seen a very small uptick in things like net revenue per person in your organizations. And so people are getting more efficient, but it's not necessarily translating to value for fees, which is very difficult. We kind of treat ourselves, at least in the design space, as a commodity in a lot of ways and don't involve ourselves as a part of the conversation. We're very bad at talking about the value we bring clients. Very serious about the relationships that we have with clients, but it's also one of the great things about working in this industry is people are so damn good. They're nice people, they're good people, ethical people, but sometimes that translates into we're not having the hard conversations with our clients and we're not justifying the fees that we have, that we should be commanding for the work that we do. And when you look at the breakdown of this, it gets even worse, particularly for, it's the 80-20, right? You look at that distribution, it holds true across so many different avenues. About 80% of the employees are in about 20% of the firms, and those are very big firms, right? So it leaves 80% of the firms that exist within that 2.4 million or so number competing for the rest, of the people. And it's the vast majority of organizations, and the vast majority of firms are less than 50 people. Good things, bad things about that. There's trade-offs, but it indicates it's an input into how do we think about strategy, how do we think about recruiting and retention, how do we think about the buzzword of the day, which is AI, right? And how do we think about our technology strategy, do more with less? How do we optimize, make things better over time? All right, so we got through section 1. You made it. You made it through the economic data. I am not an economist, but I play one on TV. So section 2, framework. So, okay, there's a problem, downturns have happened before. Many of you have probably been through multiple versions of this and have some indication of these are the things that work and these are the things that don't work. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about intentional strategy creation, how working with specifically firms in this industry and professional services, how do we think about structuring the framework of a strategic plan so that you can be more successful? Because there's a lot of frameworks out there. Right, there's a lot of things that you can grab onto. You can grab onto OKRs. You can grab, which is objectives and key results. That's kind of the Google methodology. You can grab onto stakeholder theory model, which is becoming more popular, but it's generally been reserved for nonprofits. There's McKinsey 7S. There's balanced scorecard. There's all kinds of different things that exist. And so where do you start, particularly if you don't think about this? If you look at the surveys that they do of Fortune 500 companies, one of the things that always surprises me, there's the typical things in there, skills that you have to develop in your career to reach the executive level of an organization, like communication, right? Everybody expects that you have to be a good communicator. The thing that is a little bit of a bucking the trend against the traditional model of professional development and learning, which has been you only learn the skills when it's appropriate for you to learn them, right? That you don't need the skills for strategic thinking has always been the mindset, until you reach a point where you are responsible for strategic decision making and strategic problem solving. That's not true according to Fortune 500 CEOs. If you don't develop that skill set early in your career, then you're never going to make it there. And so it really undergirds the importance of talking about this with your people. Help them think through the problems in your organization. Help them understand how the organization works. Help them understand what the strategy is. It is always one of the lowest scoring items on our survey that we do for every firm that we work with, is their understanding of the mission, the vision, and the strategy of the organization. Those 3 questions. They're very low, and it's, you get funny answers for mission, right? It's to make money, to put money in shareholders' pockets. It's kind of, some people are facetious with it, but it really just speaks to people don't know what you're trying to accomplish. And if people don't know what you're trying to accomplish, they can't help you get there. And so that's one of the main things that you want to think about. But before we get into that, let's zoom out, right? Strategy is all about zooming out and looking at the horizon. So the role of leadership within any organization is to move the organization in the direction of the next peak, right? You're always trying to move onward and upward. To the right and up is kind of where we're trying to move. So you see this, you've got a vision and you're clearly communicating this vision to your organization that this is where we need to go, right? I don't know what happened to my middle slide, but anyway, so you've got kind of a current state here. You've got a future state that exists up in this space, up at the peak of the mountain there, and you can see that as a leader in your organization. You can see clearly there's some dips, there's some valleys. We've got to go around this and move that way, but this is what your team sees. Right? They don't know what's around that next corner. They don't know what you're trying to aim towards. They don't know. Oftentimes, on a project, how many hours do I have? What kind of fee is associated with it? How does it make money? How do invoices get paid? What's my role in all of this? They have no idea. And again, we've got to move them. We've got to help them see the overall vision. Help connect their individual behavior, the individual actions of those that are working there, to the larger strategic picture of the organization. And so we do that through strategic planning. Here it is. It's out of order. So, high-performance firms. So when we take a look at all the organizations we've worked with, Zwei Group's been working with these firms for over 35 years, and we've worked with hundreds and thousands of firms within this space. There are a couple of things that you see within high-performance firms. Number one, mission, vision, values. They're aligned around a vision and a mission and embracing a shared set of values for their organization, right? It's really super important. I get a lot of eye rolls on this. I get it. It's done really poorly in most organizations. It's not impactful. It's not memorable. It's a bunch of BS. You sit around a leadership table, and everybody's got to get their word in, right? This sounds great. Collaboration. We got to get collaboration in there. So you end up with something like a cost-effective, innovative, engineering services for your community, people in the world, right? And it's it drags on usually for another 2 paragraphs, and nobody can understand it, and it's unusable. It doesn't. The function doesn't exist. So the actual definition of these words, I'm not as concerned about. The academic definition, it's the function that they play within your organization. It's absolutely critical. It transforms organizations. We've seen it happen. We've helped make it happen. And so, but that's not what this talks about. So, pressures. And this is where I was talking about the different pressures that are exerted on your organization. You're effectively balancing the pressures from clients, your employees, and your shareholders. So financial outcomes, employee experience, and client experience are all important things. You can't ignore any one of them. So even as we go on in this talk and we talk about the importance of client experience and client centricity strategy being the #1 thing, the driving factor behind this, it influences, and Blake will talk about how it influences all the rest of these different buckets. Operations. You've got operations, you've got things that you're doing, and you need to be operating with thoughtful policies, practices, and procedures that are broadly communicated and that can scale. Scalability is where you see a lot of the problems in organizations. They struggle to get beyond certain milestones. You see where people get stuck when you start looking at the macro data on this. They get stuck at certain sizes because they need to change leadership, they need to change processes or policies that can actually scale with the organization. And then finally, they're executing a strategic growth plan that does a few things for them, right? Capitalizes on strengths, differentiates itself in the marketplace, creates and sustains a competitive advantage, and are smart. So I talk about dumb goals and smart goals. Start with dumb goals when you're doing strategic planning, and then you eventually end up with smart goals, right? You have to have, and I think everybody's familiar with the acronym SMART at this point: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. Dumb goals are dream-driven, uplifting, method-friendly, and behavior-oriented. So those are things like the moonshot, right? You don't start your strategic planning engagement with like, we're going to get 3% growth. I think that's going to be great. We're gonna do that. Maybe it's 20%. Maybe we're building, helping to get to the moon or something, or Mars, like Elon Musk. So you start with dumb, then you eventually end up with smart goals as it goes on. So what is strategic planning? Very simple definition: a set of goal-directed actions that a firm takes to gain and sustain a competitive advantage. That's it, in a nutshell. Competitive advantage is very important. This is one of the areas that I think is not very well understood. What is a true competitive advantage, a sustainable competitive advantage versus something that everybody else can claim? I'll ask firms and firm leaders this all the time. I'll say, what's your competitive advantage? Well, we've got a 90% repeat client base. Awesome, so does everybody else. They like working with you. So does the other clients for your other organizations. They like working with their people too. And so there's so often the things that we reach for are things that don't meet this criteria. So there's a number of frameworks. This is one that I like, so I thought I'd give it to you. It's a framework to think through your competitive advantage, and it's VRIO, the VRIO framework. It's an acronym, just like so many things are, and it stands for these 4 things: valuable, rare, inimitable, and organized. And so you're asking yourself questions along the way. Is the thing that I'm claiming to be a competitive advantage valuable? If it's not, then if your clients don't care about it, then it doesn't mean anything, right? It's not a competitive advantage. If it's not rare, other people are doing it, it's not giving you an advantage in the marketplace. If it's not inimitable, is it easily copied? Can somebody just go out and buy the capability? Often cases, it's the example there, then that's not a sustainable competitive advantage. It's a temporary competitive advantage. And then finally, organized. If you're not organized to take advantage of it, you don't have the skill sets, the capabilities, et cetera, then you're not going to be successful, right? It's not going to be a sustainable competitive advantage. So just something to take away to help you think through if you're doing these processes with your organization. All right. So I like this quote by Roger Martin. He's a professor of strategy. He's a Harvard Business Review contributor. It's that at its core, strategy means choosing to do some things and not to do others. It's just as much about what you're not willing to do as it is what you are willing to do. When I'm in these rooms and we're designing strategic plans, so often it's what are the next new things that we can do, and so you end up with 400 action items on a spreadsheet that it's like, okay, this is a 3-year plan. There's no way we're going to get to all of these initiatives, right? And so I've been really focusing on this lately in the last year or two of challenging firms to think about prioritization. What is really the priority? Because if there's too much, we're not going to do it, or we're not going to do it successfully. So we really need to be thinking about that. All right, let's think about strategy in a very simple way to start, and then we'll get more complex as we go. There is this idea of the strategy value stick, right? On the bottom, you've got your willingness to sell, your employees, and on the top, you've got your clients, and that's the willingness to buy. And it's not like it's a fixed stick. That's the important thing here, is if you take away here, you're not taking away from clients. The idea is to stretch this out, get as big of a stick as you possibly can. And so you can see the definitions there. The maximum a customer will pay or tolerate to achieve a particular aim, and then the willingness to sell is different for every organization as well. What is it going to take for somebody to sign on with your organization? It often equates to compensation, but it's not strictly compensation. It's kind of the total employee experience. It's a lot more than just the value of their salary. So I think it's a little better said in this way. So when you look at strategy, it involves the strategies, initiatives, and actions that you'll take to achieve certain objectives, and then we solve these problems for clients, for employees, and this is how it breaks out, right? So you're trying to stretch this stick as big as possible, and you're trying to lower what their willingness to sell, increase the willingness to pay through the various strategies that Blake will talk about and the different things that you can pursue here. But the firm value is right there in the middle, right? So you're going to, this is going to be employee satisfaction because they're willing to come work for you, maybe for free if you're, at one point in time, Google and Facebook, they're willing to work for you for free just because it's a cool place to work. But you're going to pay them more than that, so they're happy about that, right? They're delighted. That's employee satisfaction. And the same thing holds true on the top end of this stick, which is client delight. They're willing to pay all the way up here, but your price of services are down here. So anything, it's a very simple way of looking at this. It's obviously more nuanced and more complicated than this, but it's a really good framework to keep in the back of your mind as passing through a filter for your strategic plans. The other thing that's really important is alignment within strategic planning. So again, I know it's a little bit small, probably text for those of you in the back, so I'll read kind of some of this. On the y-axis, we have to understand how well aligned is our strategy with the mission and vision of the organization, the purpose, why we exist, right? And then on the x-axis, right here on the bottom, is the alignment of strategy with organizational capability. You can see how that, how that breaks out. What you're trying to do is get yourself to this top right box. If you're aligned on both vision and capability, then you've got the best chance of winning. 2x2 matrix, consultant's best friend. So let's look at the strategy framework. So we're going to start with what strategy is, what you need. The really cool thing about strategy is you can answer this question: what are we going to play and how are we going to win? How do we define winning? We can just rig the game basically, right? Obviously, it comes and bumps up against market realities, and you've got theories about how you do these things. But you work your way through defining where we're going to play, how are we going to win, which are the objectives, which direction are we going to pursue, which are the strategies, and then what skills and capabilities is it going to take, the initiatives and the actions that need to be pursued. And so when you put this all together, the next slide, it'll kind of bring this all together, is within this framework is the one that we like to use. We like to use an adapted, balanced scorecard approach to this. And we don't necessarily use the scorecard itself. If anybody's seen that, it's a pretty complicated kind of scorecard. It works well for a lot of organizations. But we use basically the perspectives. This was developed for kind of mid-size organizations, so it doesn't precisely work perfectly for very small companies and maybe large companies that are focused more on an aggressive growth strategy or an innovation strategy might think about something else. But this works for the vast majority of firms, and it can also be very easily adapted to exactly what you're trying to do with it. So you have 4 perspectives: financial, employee, operations, and clients. And those are the 4 objectives that you're defining within those 4 categories. Because when you think about it, really, what else is there to your business? You've got financial outcomes, you've got revenue coming in, right? Profit, all those good things. You've got some sort of operations that are in place, you've got employees, and you have clients. The only 5th piece of this that often gets defined, particularly for architecture firms, it's high design. So really focused on design, it raises its level to being an objective for the organization. And then innovation has been one that has been kind of pulled out of this as well. And either one of those could fall within this structure, but oftentimes gets pulled out. And so what pops out of this is this framework: objectives, strategies, initiatives, define key stakeholders, and then put performance measures and tactics in place. So here's the funnel, right? This is the general framework and how it lays itself out. That this is the one that we use at SWI Group, is taking a look at where our current state is and doing a lot of research and a lot of analysis, broad analysis. So when we look at designing, we look at phase one is going to be looking at all the research and indicators. We're going to do as broad of a cross-section as we possibly can, get as much information as we possibly can. Entering into this process, the design happens from the top down, execution and implementation happens from the bottom up. And so you put this in, you've got possible approaches, you're putting it through the vision, mission, and values, you're defining your the objectives are going to be achieved through pursuing strategies, initiatives, and actions. The cool thing about this is it ends up, the strategy level really, is what I think is the coolest part of this framework, which is the adaptable part, because we're looking for something that's adaptable, scalable, transparent, that can be understood how each component contributes to the others. And so when you get together and you're saying, this is our strategy, this is our strategic plan, here are all the initiatives and things that we're going to do, well, sometimes they're really kind of theories about what we should do. And the marketplace changes. A global pandemic gets thrown in the works, right? And then you have to adapt and change the strategy. We don't reconvene the entire group of leadership to adapt the initiatives. We take a look at what the strategies tell us, and then we empower our people to go ahead and say, what else can you do that's in line with this strategy that helps us achieve that objective, and we go in that direction. And so there's a whole framework that we'll not get into in terms of implementation and how that process works itself out, but I'm happy to field any questions on that. All right, Blake, you ready to rock and roll? Give them the solution.
I'm ready to do this. Absolutely. Thank you. All right, so at this part, we're going to talk really about what client experience is and why it's important to focus on during a recession. Honestly, it's important all the time, but there are different reasons why you implement it during a recession. What is your thoughts on a definition of client experience? I'll ask you. How would you define client experience?
I think it would be if you asked them, what would they say their elevator pitch is about you?
Okay. Okay. The answer's on the board. Thank you for not cheating. I really appreciate that. I was visiting my friends over here, and the slide kept giving all the answers, and so I'm hoping that that's not going to happen today. But it's the emotional reaction that your clients have with every interaction of your brand. So a lot of times we think client experience is just in the process of doing a project, but it's really at the moment that they're looking for your firm, to the moment they begin talking with your firm, when they're working with your firm, and even after your project or your matter is done, you can impact client experiences that drive better outcomes for your organization. And the design, the implementation, the execution of it, and the repeatability of it is going to be really, really important to drive some of the things that we'll talk about today. So a lot of times people will say, well, how do you design a CX strategy? It depends. It really depends. The number of firms that I have met with, is everybody familiar with the Lilly Pulitzer? It's the only thing that's kind of coming to mind. Everybody familiar with that in the room? Gentlemen, for the ones that are not, this is really nice attire that women buy. It's a very popular thing here in the South. And then everybody's familiar with Walmart. Well, too often, somebody thinks they're Lilly Pulitzer and they're Walmart. Both work. Both of them work. Walmart is the largest employer in the world, by the way. They do just fine. But they do just fine by being the cheapest, by being everywhere, and being there all the time at every corner you go to. But if they were to claim that they were Lilly Pulitzer and you walk into a Walmart, you're going to have a very different experience. So really, the first thing that you have to do when you're developing a CX strategy is you have to understand, where are you? Who are you from your client's perception? Not who do you think you are, not yet, but what do your clients think about your firm? What is their perception of your organization? And then you have to define where you want to be. And then we'll figure out what the gaps are, and from there you'll be able to do things like journey map, design the way you deliver on project experiences. There's a lot of different things that you can do, but one really important thing that is sticking out, and you're going to see this in a second, is anybody familiar with the CX gap? Is anybody familiar with it? So Bain & Company 2 years ago 2.5 years ago now, went out to 562 CEOs. Some of you know this in the room, so please don't answer if you know it. 562 CEOs, and they asked them, are you delivering an above average client experience? What percentage do you all think said yes? 80%? That is a really great guess. My favorite part about this was then Bain & Company went out to every single one of their clients and asked them the same question. Are you getting a better than average client experience? What percentage of their clients do you think agreed? 8. 8. And so why does this matter? Why is this important? So right now we've all been very busy. We've got record backlog. We've got all this work that's out there. We've got all this funding from the DOT. And we all talk about how 80% of our work is repeat business. But you've probably heard my business partner talk about this. This is the gas station on the right mentality. When do you stop for gas? Whenever you run out, and it's either on the way to work or it's on the way home from work. They get repeat business too, but there's really no differentiation. So when your client has $2 million to give away each year today, and that goes down to $1 million or $500,000 next year, how are you going to capture as much share of wallet as you possibly can? And that's by closing this CX gap. You've got to think about who you want to be, who are you today, how do you close that gap, and then what is the future state that you have looked, over the peaks and troughs and valleys and all that, and you see the peak. Where do you want to be? Then you have to design, you have to execute, and you have to be able to renew capabilities. Our clients' expectations and needs change all the time. They change all the time. And it's just critical that you design, put your client at the center of it, execute it, and have the ability to renew your capabilities. Do you think our clients' experience or expectations were the same in 2020 to 2021? No, right? No, definitely not. It changed. They weren't sure what was going on. They weren't even sure what the new expectations were. But what did most firms do when COVID came? Did they look outward or did they look inward? Y'all are a very quiet crowd. Very quiet. Admittedly, we all looked inward, did we not? I mean, Client Savvy did it too, by the way. We looked inward. We didn't know, there's no book, there's no precedence, we didn't know what to have. It's not the last time something like this will happen. The recession will force change. We'll need to be measuring it, designing around it, and executing on our strategy. So, growth in CX and its impact on sales strategy. 27, up from 2 years ago at 10%, 27% of your clients right now are willing to accept a fee increase. Raise your hand if you believe that. Okay, well, we've got 4 people that believe it. It's absolutely true. In fact, I would argue that the number is higher than that. There's a firm that I'm working with right now, and we're doing client interviews. And we're doing 6 interviews to whom we're then taking to a CX panel and designing solutions for them, okay? 3 of them are public, municipalities, towns, developers. If there's anybody that wants it cheaper than a developer or a municipality, let me know. Let me know. Do you know what all 6 of them said? If you did this, if you did that, we would pay you more. And we're already paying you more than everybody else. And I found that fascinating. Because if you can position yourself as a partner, if you can focus on these organizations or entities' outcomes, if you can deliver a different experience, they will pay you more money. And they will say it to you, which I thought was fascinating. I didn't expect it from the public sector, but the public sector was willing to pay more as well. There's a 19% increase in competitive wins for those who are leveraging client experience as a discipline. So who in here is in marketing in your firm? Just Tammy? Okay, you all? So do you customize every proposal, or do you kind of change the cover page? Every proposal. Fascinating. And what is typically on your front page? A project photo? What does it say about you? Or oh, she's lying now. God. I thought we didn't let liars in this year. Anyway, go ahead. What? Okay. Okay. So I'm going to ask people just to participate here. Why do your clients choose you? Trust, okay. Reputation. You understand their business. So how would you, is that technical expertise? Like how would you?
Understanding the industry, having worked in that specific industry, and being able to offer
So the expertise in the industry.
Exceptional products and services.
Okay. So we last year did a study. Some of you have already seen this. So last year we did a study and we picked up the bottom 3 things that were important to your clients and why they're choosing you. And we also ranked the top 3. Do you know what the bottom 3 were? And yet it's all in our proposals. You know, we've got the technical expertise. Look at all the projects we've done. Look at our reputation. Those are all table stakes. Those are all table stakes. The 3 top reasons why your clients are choosing you today, and I mean by a landslide, focusing on outcomes, proactive communication, and positioning yourself as a partner. In other words, being empathetic. What is the skin in the game for the person that you're working with? What does it cost them if the project doesn't go well? How does this all end for them? And so if you can focus on outcomes, as an example, let's say you're an architectural firm, and you're going, okay, Mrs. Customer, why are you building this new HQ? Oh, well, I'm trying to, design a space that is more engaging for my clients and my employees. Okay, well, why do you need it more engaging? Well, we've got low engagement at the office, and we've had a high number of turnover. Interesting. How much is that costing you on an annualized basis? It's cost me about $2 million, about $100,000 per employee, just like it is in the AEC and professional services market. Why don't we sit down and draw some things together and look at how we can make this a more engaging space? Oh, great. Yeah, I'd love to do that. Okay, well, if we do these things, how much bottom line impact do you think we'll have on your business? That's a very different conversation than, hey, Lori, let me tell you about all the projects I've done. Let me tell you about me, all the different things that we've done, our technical expertise. Here's the project management staff. That's not what they care about anymore. They care about putting your empathetic shoes on, focusing on their outcomes, partnering with them. And by the way, who does pretty much the same kind of projects all the time in the room? Okay, well, civil engineering, something like that counts. I bet if you think about the matters, the projects, anything that you do on a daily basis, I bet you could pick out and point out where the roadblocks are going to come up, where the challenges are going to come up. Do you think you could do that? Does anybody sit down with their client and say, Mr. or Mrs. Client, these are the challenges that I see in this type of a project. This is where we expect hurdles to jump over. This is the problems that we're going to have in the project, but this is what we've done to try to mitigate those challenges. This is what we've done to make your life easier about it, and we'll be communicating with you before those challenges to let you know how things are going. Does anybody on the front end talk about all the problems that you're going to face? You do. That's fantastic. That's fantastic, because we've all had perfect projects, right? Okay, and then there's a 20% increase in sales. So CX and pricing strategy, I just talked about this a little bit. If you can focus on outcomes, be an orange in a field of apples, be an apple in a field of oranges, it just depends on what your client wants. Don't treat the project as a project. The project is what? It's an enabler. Nobody wakes up in the morning and goes, I get to do a project with an engineering firm or a construction firm today. What they're doing is they're excited about what that project enables them to do as a business, what it enables their staff to realize as an experience or their clients to realize as an experience. And so if you can focus on outcomes, you can really start to sell on price. In that scenario, maybe we cut employee turnover by 50%, put $1 million in the pocket. Now, does my price for design matter as much as someone who comes in and just talks about themselves for an hour and puts a low number on the table? It's different because they're not focusing on those outcomes. So really use CX as a part of your pricing strategy. If you do what the clients are wanting today, you can price it much higher. Now, operational excellence. Did we, I think, Withers, do you mind if I share some information about you guys? So Brock Storson, a dear friend of mine at Withers Ravenel, we did a presentation at ACEC in the fall, and I had some lower numbers, but what he told me was that on average, 14 to 16% of our relationship managers and project managers, their time is spent on wasted effort. And so I think about that and I go, okay, well, who needs to hire someone right now? Everybody. So what happens if you're able to reduce that wasted effort? If you're able to meet the expectations plus 1%, if you're able to set the expectations both internally and externally with your client, and you reduce that wasted effort, let's just say on average of the 32%, how many more projects could your clients take on? How much more profitable would each project be because you're not spending time gold plating, over delivering, giving stuff away and not charging for it? 19% day reduction in AR. Did you know that if you just simply ask for feedback during the project life cycle, that on average you get paid 19 days faster? Any VC funds, firms in here funded by? No, I didn't think so. Cash is kind of king. It matters. 40% reduction in employee turnover, 4% increase in fees, and a 12% increase in loss liability claims. All of these numbers are tremendous. And so when you're trying to implement, I saw the polling this morning where some folks in here are thinking about going down the CX journey. Tie it into all of these business outcomes. If you look at the bottom line impact that happens to your firm for implementing something like this, and we'll pass these slides out afterwards, I want you to go back, look at your profitability, look at your total revenue, and I want you to just throw these average numbers in and see what sort of return you get. And that's just if you're an average CX performing firm. So high design and innovation. Newman Monson, I can't help but talk about them all the time. They in 2017 they won more design awards in 5 years than they had in the previous 40. And they did that by focusing on client experience management, understanding who their ideal client profiles are, understanding the personas of those ideal clients, the one that want to pay more and want to pursue them rather than they pursue the client. Newman Monson did something just phenomenal there. Financial and client sentiment analysis. So is anybody looking at client sentiment and correlating that with financials and determining who your ideal client profiles are? That upper right quadrant? I see a couple nods. Raise your hand if you are. Okay. Are you doing anything to design around that to say, all right, well, that's the ideal type of client that I'm looking for? Maybe you're doing geographical expansion like you over here and going, that's the absolute type of client we need to expand with? Sure. Well, it is professional services. I talked about understanding your ideal client profile. I'm going to give you a case study here in a minute. You know, CX is not always about growth. I think, John, you and I have had very extensive conversations about this. Everybody thinks that client experience management is about explosive growth. It's not always. Sometimes it's about just keeping everybody together and working with the right type of clients that you want to work with at the most profitable clip that you possibly can. Maybe you don't want to be a big firm. But you got to understand who your ideal clients are. You got to understand what motivates and what moves them. And then you have to design the way that you interact with them during the 5 stages of empathy that I showed you on the second slide. When they start looking for a firm like yours, when they engage in a conversation with you, when they enter into a contract, when they're doing the project and closing it out, all the way to when they're done working with you. And if you can figure out what moves them and drives them, some really amazing stuff starts happening to your business. So this again is on empathy and pursuing work. Who tries to leverage empathy in your proposals and your pursuits? Okay. Are the people pursuing the work technical professionals? Keep your hand raised if you're doing that. How well does empathy work with that? Okay. All right. So some really powerful things that can happen is teach, hold lectures, hold sessions on empathy inside of your organization. Teach people how to put themselves in someone else's shoe and then use that to pursue the work. And it's amazing what starts to happen when you do that. And the client now knows that you're speaking to them, about them, for them. You understand them. I believe you said someone over here said they trust us, they know us. You know, we know them. It's a big indicator and a big reason why you can win work.
Well, here's a fascinating exercise just for you to do at home, which is look at your website or other design firms' websites and take a look at the portfolio page. Take a look at your projects and what you highlight on your projects. And then if you're lucky enough that your clients are also highlighting the same projects on their pages, take a look at the difference. Massive difference most of the time, what we find important, what they find important. How that impacts work.
Sure.
And again, lean in on the 3 main reasons clients are choosing you. Focus on outcomes, position yourself as a partner, and do proactive communication with your clients. I think we all have to admit that we're in the day-to-day of life and work, we're all pretty reactive. Proactive takes a lot of work, but it does astounding things for the relationship. All right, so engagement to CX, to actual experience. So the difference between experienced and engaged organizations. Those that have engaged employees and engaged clients are one thing. Those that are focusing on CX is a completely different. Did you know that 33% of employees right now, only 33% of your employees are engaged? 51%. I'm sorry we keep delivering such bad news to you guys. I'm sitting up here thinking like, man, I kind of want to go out the back door. This is tough stuff. But we're all looking for employees right now. Meanwhile, 51% of our staff are actively looking for another opportunity. I mean, this is getting expensive. Got to focus on employee experience, got to focus on client experience. And then 16% are actively disengaged. That's a pretty large number. So again, transitioning from engaged to more of an experience-led metric, they're 4.4% or times more profitable, 2 times more revenue, 1.6 times higher pay, lower turnover by 40%. Did you know the average employee turnover rate last year was upwards of 21%? At an average cost of $100K per employee. Did you all know that? All right, so I'm gonna do some fun math with you guys. You're a 100-person firm and you're average. What sort of profitability problem is that for you? 2 million, 2.1 million. $2.1 million in profitability if you're average in employee turnover. This is stuff that you have to invest in. You really got to do it, and you got to make sure that you're keeping your best employees too during the time of a recession, because there are other firms that are highly motivated to implement client experience management as a part of their strategy. I've talked to a number of folks here that are just going through strategic planning, and CX is a major pillar. It's got to be done. It's got to be done, or else you may fall by the wayside. So some case studies. Newman Monson, I've told this story a million times, so sorry for y'all that have seen it. They just blow my mind away. When people think CX are like, we're too small, you know, we're just a small firm, we don't really have any aspirational goals to be huge. Newman Monson, 42-person firm, maybe the most innovative firm that we've worked with in the 20 years we've been in business. So what we did is we mapped, and I've only got a short amount of time, we mapped a 6-month project life cycle for them. How many interactions during that 6-month life cycle do you think that we mapped out and identified where their experience could be impacted? Throw me a number. How many? 20? 6,000. Benji, you got to go, man. What do you think? 26. 367. 367 moments that their experience could be impacted. Now, don't let that completely overwhelm you, because a lot of these things are the same. They're email interactions, they're phone calls, they're updates, they're deliverables. They're things that you can design around. So what we did is we looked at their project life cycle. We looked at the ideal client type that they were hoping to work with. We designed their project experience with them that they could deliver repeatedly, time after time again, no matter the project manager. So really neat things start happening, like brand loyalty now leaves an individual and goes to the brand. That's why when people leave our firms, it's so darn expensive, because they take a lot of work with them. So the outcomes of this was, at a 14-month time frame, they had a 100 Net Promoter Score. What that means is, if you're not familiar with Net Promoter Score, is that they ask the question at the end of every project to every one of the stakeholders on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend me to a friend or colleague? 100% of them said yes. I don't think anyone realizes how difficult that is, but it is tremendously difficult. We have not seen it before, and we have not seen it since. It's a pretty great accomplishment. They lost 1 employee over a 3.5 year time frame. They pursued 2/3 less work in 2019 from 18, yet increased their profitability by 20% and their backlog by 30. Again, they increased their negotiated work by 60% because they empathetically pursued their ideal clients. They had intentionality behind every pursuit that they did. They didn't pursue anything, and they got a lot more work. And of course, they've won multiple CX awards. You'll hear about one of them this time, or at lunch today. And then last but not least, a 900-person CE firm, they were looking to grow at new markets. So they're going, well, how do we best strategically, we're opening up an office, how do we go into a new market, how do we manage this? So they went out and they did a baseline client sentiment analysis of all of their clients, all of their stakeholders, and they only brought 20 PMs into this who were seller doers. And they came into this with some eye rolls, because this is not, they don't want to sell. Name an engineer that wants to sell, or a lawyer that wants to sell. That's just not what they do. That's not why they got into business. But what they did is they looked at who their promoters were. They went and sat down and had empathetic conversations with them. And over a 90-day program that we did with them, they had to stop it after 60 days because they got too much business, and they met their annual sales goal by February. So growing into new markets, being very strategic about it, understanding who your promoters are, seeing if they have referrals that they can help you out with in those different locations, or very similar project types, or maybe some of their own projects in different geographies, can be very, very helpful. And then I'll let him close it off. That was rushed.
Yeah, it was a little rushed. Yeah, so we spoke like auctioneers, and I apologize for that. We had a lot of passion behind this. I hope you see that, and there's a lot of good stuff that we want to share with you. Before I get to this, I want to make the tie explicit between what Blake just presented and the framework that I presented. If you think back to all of the examples of how client experience and a client centricity strategy that he talked about impact the client the organizations, is the balanced scorecard. Remember the balanced scorecard and the different things. He talked about the financial perspective. He talked about growth and profitability, right? He talked about operational excellence and the different things that it does to drive that. And he talked about the employee engagement and what that does for you. It all works together, of course, but you can see how focusing on that, making that kind of the primary point of the strategic plan, can really impact it. And to close things out, I love this quote. So I was working with a 500-person or so A&E firm in Dubai last year in October. And this quote was on, we went to the Burj Khalifa, very inspiring building, of course, and they had this whole journey of how it was constructed, the problems, everything that they had, and this quote was on there. It's a T.E. Lawrence quote from Lawrence of Arabia fame, right? You know, British diplomat, army officer, and I thought it described precisely what we're trying to do with strategic planning very, very well. And so I'm going to butcher it. It's up there perfectly, but I will butcher it by not looking at it. Which he said, all men dream, but not equally. Those that dream in the dusty recesses of their mind awake to find that it was vanity, that evaporates, right? But those that dream during the day, those are the dangerous men. For those men can dream and plan with eyes wide open to turn their dreams into reality. And it's exactly what we're trying to do, right? Thomas Jefferson said, question with boldness. And I'd ask each and every one of you to question with boldness the assumptions that you're bringing into this, what you can do with client experience design, what you can do with strategic planning, what you can do as an individual organization, whether you're a design professional, lawyer, accountant, what can you do differently than everybody else out there? people think too small. And there's some incredible ways you impact the world. So be dreamers. Question with boldness. So I know we've basically run you out of time, but if you want to stick around, we're going to stick around for some questions. Happy to entertain any questions that you might have.